Hi everybody, it's Stephanie, the Crafty Medic. I wanted to do a quick video about swaps because as we're going back to having in-person events, a lot of people are swapping again. Some of us have been doing swaps by mail, and not everybody is necessarily familiar with what swapping looks like or what swapping should be. So I thought I would do a quick video and share some of my experience swapping both in person and by mail with you. So the first thing that we should talk about is why would you swap? So for those that aren't super familiar, swaps are basically when you make cards and you usually make a bunch of the same cards and then you swap them with other people and get their creations. You do this for a number of reasons. So you can use them as samples to show your customers in person if you don't have all the products. So you may make a card from one bundle or one suite that you have, and you might swap it with people who have products that you don't have. You can also take photos and share them online to pad your social media content. And when you do this, you do want to give credit if you can and when you can. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. You can also use them just as inspiration for your own creativity or classes. You can package them up as gift surprises, and a lot of people do this. They'll package like a set of 5 cards or something like that, and that will be one of their prizes at an event. It's just a fun way to connect with other crafters and organize swaps, especially with teams or small groups that have a purpose, are a great way to kind of generate enthusiasm and get people crafting. I know a lot of team leaders will organize swaps for their team because it keeps people engaged. So there's some basic swap etiquette. And this goes kind of across the board for all different kinds of swaps, and we'll talk about some of the different kinds of swaps. Generally, you're always going to be creating full cards, unless you're in an organized swap that dictates full cards. So you can do card fronts, which is just for us in North America, a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch flat piece rather than an actual card base that folds and has an inside. The current trend I've noticed though for the last several years, even in general swapping, where there is no rules about it being full cards do tend to be more popular though. 3D swaps are popular as well, but you need to make up your mind, again, unless it's an organized swap for 3D items, you need to make up your mind before you start swapping if you're okay swapping them for cards or not. Generally, there's less people swapping 3Ds at events, so you may end up being asked, are you willing to swap for a card? Not everybody's going to have a 3D project to swap with. If you want to be super picky and particular, join an organized swap. Otherwise, you need to accept any and all swaps that are offered to you. The only exception there would be is if you've decided not to swap your 3D items for cards, that's okay. But if somebody says, can I swap with you? And you don't necessarily like the card that they're swapping or whatever, it's incredibly rude to say no. So if you're participating in general swapping, you're swapping with everybody. If you don't like that swap that somebody is swapping, um, and it can be for many different reasons, be gracious about it. So, like I said, you're not just going to say, no, I'm not swapping, and then go ahead and swap with the next person and not that person whose card you didn't like, because it could just not be your style. And if it's not your style, then you may find that it actually resonates with a customer that you're showing it to. So share it anyways, because one of your customers may see a style that speaks to them that you're not showing them already. If the craftsmanship is poor, and this happens, sometimes people's skills are just not up to the par that you have set for yourself, that you have set for your swaps. You need to accept that that person who made it did the best that they could and move on. There's a number of reasons why somebody's card may not be the style or the quality that you would put out, and you need to accept that they've done the best that they can and just move on. They may find inspiration in a swap that you give them and use that as a stepping stone to do better next time. And by everybody doing the best that they can and creating kind of the highest level of quality that they can, it elevates the quality of the cards that we receive in swaps in general. For basic swaps, for general swaps, Again, you can do full cards, you can do card fronts, 3D, mini cards, whatever you want. You can make as many or as few as you want on any theme that you want. And again, this is going to be more for your in-person swaps where you're going to an event and there's just general swapping happening. Still stick to only current product. So this is product that's going to be available for customers to buy in the next few months. So if there's a demonstrator pre-order right now, absolutely you can use that because that's going to be available for customers in the future. But you want to avoid using anything that's retired, dormant. So say, it's been announced, hey, this is going to be in a future catalog, but it's not available right now. You probably wouldn't want to use that. You don't want to use paper pumpkin unless, again, it's a specific paper pumpkin swap, because those items are not guaranteed for customers to be able to buy. And definitely don't use anything that's not Stampin' Up. Can be really tempting to use cheaper paper, cheaper embellishments, things like that, but that's just not a swap that the recipient is going to be able to use. Make sure that you put your name and a contact method on whatever you do so that people can contact you if they have questions and give you credit. Now, I like to do this in a way that isn't actually permanently marked on the back of my cards. So like if this were my swap card, I wouldn't put my stamp on the back. I would simply tuck in a piece of paper or a Post-it note or a business card or something like that with my card so that people know how to get in touch with me. But if they don't want to be giving your contact information or your name to their customers when they're looking at them, they don't have to. That's up to them. When you're making your card bases, so you've got your card bases, make sure that you are scoring them and use a bone folder and really get that crease down. That's going to make your card so much nicer and so much more professional. Do your best work. You want your projects to be something that others can be proud to show their customers. If you have limited time and your choice is to make a few projects that are really good quality or rush through and make more, but they're going to be a lower quality, they're going to have less layers, they're going to not be stamped as cleanly, those kinds of things, focus on making fewer, better projects. And at an event, don't be afraid to walk up to people and ask if they're swapping. Generally, people will kind of have them out and easy to see. I usually have a tote, and then I can just kind of show off the cards that I'm doing. I usually have a few different options, and even just carrying one in your hand and being like, hey, I'm swapping. People will approach you. But don't be afraid to walk up to people and say, hey, are you swapping? Or especially if you see somebody with a tote or a bag, they may tell you, sorry, these are actually for an organized swap. But if it's just general swapping, they'll swap with you. For organized swaps, make sure that you pay attention to the deadlines. There may be deadlines to sign up, there may be deadlines to send your cards, to receive the cards, all those kinds of things. And make sure that you read the rules. So for example, my show-off swaps, I have kind of very set kind of, it has to be this, it has to include that, those kinds of things. And keep that handy as you design. A lot of times when I do my show-off swaps, I'll have people send me a photo of their swap and they've left off their embellishments, for example. I require multiple embellishments on my show-off swaps, or it's all one layer, which again is not allowed in my show-off swaps, things like that. So make sure that you're reading those rules and that you keep them handy. It's not meant to be intimidating. It's just meant to, again, elevate that level of how nice those swaps are, basically. It's always better to overdo. If it says you need to have 2 layers, 3 layers is totally fine. If it calls for 1 embellishment, add 2, things like that. And if you're not sure, clarify the rules with the organizer. Again, pay careful attention. Layers, marking your card is really big thing too. So like I said, I don't put my stamp on the back of my cards. Some you have to, some that's again not allowed. And packaging, some will have rules about how to package your cards. And always, always, always reach out to the organizer. They should be more than happy to help, either with your design or if you're unsure about packaging or timelines, those kinds of things. Reach out to the organizer and they should be more than happy to help you. All right, on to the fun stuff. How to step up your swapping game. So this is all optional stuff for general swapping, and for your organized swaps, some of these things may be required and others may be optional. and this comes just for me doing thousands of swaps over the years. The swaps that stand out to me that are nicer, that I'm super excited about, do multiple of these things or all of these things. So first, avoid using regular basic white or very vanilla for your card bases. Use either colored cardstock or thick cardstock. The regular stuff is great for stamping on, but as a card base, it just feels flimsy. Decorate the inside of your card. This adds a more professional, completed look, and it just adds that extra little bit of a wow. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and I will post some examples. So you can add just a basic white or a very vanilla layer inside the card if you're using a colored card base, and this makes it easier to write on. It also makes the card feel more substantial, and it'll stand up easier if it's on display. So that's kind of the basic, simple, like no-brainer. You can also add a strip of designer series paper to the inside layer, and that's what I do with a lot of my cards. If I'm using designer series paper, I just add a little strip on the outside, on the inside. Or you can do some stamping on that inside layer. And if you have extra die cuts, you're die cutting anyways, throw a couple extra dies on there, especially if you're using like those little intricate flowers and stuff like that, and then add those to the inside of your card. You can also decorate an envelope and include it with your swap. That way, the recipient can not only share that extra inspiration, but it can also be ready to send to somebody. And I do this a lot. Swaps that I receive, if I just need a quick thank you card or even a birthday card for somebody, I'll grab a swap, I'll slap a post-it note in it, and it's ready to go. And again, to decorate your envelope, you can add designer series paper to the flap, you can emboss the flap with an embossing folder, and you can stamp on the envelope. Make sure you check the rules with your postal service about where and how dark you can decorate your envelope, because some of that, it may actually impede you mailing your card. So just double check that if you're going to do it. The flap is fair game, I believe, for pretty much all postal services though. When you go to actually package your swap, put it in a clear medium envelope. The cards fit into them, so just our regular clear medium envelopes from the catalog. And you can either actually seal the back or just tuck the flap in, and that kind of keeps all your pieces together. So if you're including a card, an envelope, and a business card, or a printed out recipe or something like that, it keeps it all together and it protects it, and it's just a really nice kind of professional presentation. You can also include, like I said, that printed recipe, which is really nice to have, whether it's just a supply list or it includes instructions. A super easy way to do this is to just print it onto copy paper with your contact information. I like to actually include a picture of the swap that I do because, again, I'm a little bit extra and I like to do all those little extra bits. So I'll actually include a picture of the swap so that if that swap ends up being sent out to somebody, they can still have that little recipe that has the picture of the swap on it as well. If you're mailing your swaps, definitely package them in clear envelopes. You can actually attach the address labels right to the outside of the clear envelope with your stamp, or you can print the addresses and insert them into the envelope, and this will totally like help protect your card, and it includes like protects that decorated envelope so that it arrives intact so that the recipient can use it. Now, this only unfortunately works for North American demonstrators. There's other clear envelopes that are available for the cards from the A4 cardstock in other countries, but not through Stampin' Up, unfortunately. But you can get them on Amazon through different companies, all those kinds of things. And it's just because the medium envelopes don't actually hold the full A4 card. And don't be afraid to show off techniques, fancy folds, other wow factors. It usually doesn't take much time and extra materials, but swaps that can actually teach the recipient something or show them a different way of layering things are always super memorable. Common problems. Again, thousands of swaps over the years. These are the common ones that I see that really kind of make me go, oh, okay, and put that swap kind of to the bottom of the pile. and make me not as excited about it. I understand that there's reasons why people will do these things, whether it's cost or time, or they just don't know any better. I know they're doing their best, but it makes me a little bit less excited about their swap. The big one is using non-Stampin' Up! Cardstock. Yeah, you can tell, especially for like the stamped layers or the card bases, use Stampin' Up! Cardstock. Um, it's the best for a reason. And you can really tell when somebody's using a cheaper cardstock. Some people even use copy paper, which I think is really, as much as I try to be gracious, is really not acceptable for a stamped layer to be kind of that transparent and super flimsy. Using products that are retired, dormant, non-Stampin' Up, or otherwise not available for customers to buy. To me, that really defeats the purpose for most people who swap. They want to show their customers something that will inspire them to buy the product. So I understand sometimes the sentiment, you don't have the right sentiment, you don't have time to order it, things like that. Try to find a current way to express the idea that you have. And making them overly simple. This isn't the time for simple stamping. Do something kind of a little bit more for swaps. Even just a few rhinestones or a bow will elevate a project, but it's best to include layers, die cuts, punched shapes, all that kind of stuff. When in doubt, add extra. Yeah, no, just like one piece of stamped cardstock, unless you're doing something completely phenomenal. And honestly, I've never seen a single layer. That's not true. I've seen one single layer card that I really went wow with. And even that single layer was still layered onto colored cardstock, and it used a lot of different techniques to create kind of a scene. So it actually probably took longer than a lot of the cards that had many layers in the same swap. Rough cuts. Make sure you're using a new trimmer blade. If you're getting those little fuzzies along the edge, swap it out. Trimmer blades are meant to be consumables. Unless you're doing like a purposely torn edge or something like that, your edges should be neat and tidy. Poor quality stamping is another one. Make sure that your ink pads are fresh and re-inked. Don't oversaturate your stamps. Don't rock them. Avoid those little halos that you get around. And if you do smudge or get those little halos or something, stamp it again. Don't use that piece on a card that you're going to swap. Paper has two sides. Flip it over, do it again on the other side, or cut a new piece. The other one that breaks my heart is when we're doing the mail-in swaps, and these beautifully decorated envelopes, but then they're not put into the clear envelope. So that envelope actually ends up going through the mail, and it has my address on it, and it has stamps on it and postmarks on it. So I have this beautiful envelope, but I can't do anything with it. I can't pass it on to the next person. I actually, when I send just cards out for birthdays and stuff like that, I put them in clear envelopes so the recipient can either keep it and keep it on display, or they can use the envelope that I sent it in. They just take it out of the clear envelope and send it on to somebody else. So hopefully that helped you with some kind of tips about participating in swaps. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about organizing swaps. So if you're not interested in organizing swaps, you can stop here, move on. But if you're like me and you love swaps so much that you want to start organizing your own swaps, here's some of the things that I've learned over the last few years of actually organizing swaps. The first thing is going to be deciding on the format. Is this going to be an in-person swap at a specific event, or is it going to be a mail-in swap? And there's a couple ways to do the mail-in swaps. You can either have everybody send their cards to you with a little bit of a fee for additional shipping, and then you send on the packages of swapped cards to everybody. Or are they going to mail them directly to each person in the swap or in the group? How big are the groups going to be? More people in a group means more projects to make, but you also get more projects. And then you can also choose to do a +1 swap. This is common, especially in in-person swaps, where each person creates an extra project for the organizer. So you don't actually have to participate in the swaps yourself, and that's just kind of your payment for organizing. So you'll have groups of 10, but they'll make 11 cards and give you one. You have to decide on the guidelines. So consider things that I mentioned before, like layers, embellishments. Are you going to require people to decorate the inside? Are envelopes going to be included and do they have to be decorated? Is it going to be focusing on a specific catalog, a specific product line or theme? Some swaps will have groups for different themes as well, which is a kind of a fun way to do it. So it'll be one big swap, but there'll be multiple groups for different themes. Make sure you set a realistic deadline for sign up. Set it far enough in advance that people get a chance to create before they actually have to swap. And if it's mail in, allow them time for the postal service to do their thing. If it's a mail in swap, you'll have to set a deadline for mailing as well. You have to allow time for the postal service to do their thing. What I really like doing with mail-in swaps is setting a date and doing a Zoom call so that people can share their cards. And it's just a lot of fun to kind of add that personal element to it. It's not required, but it is really nice to create a little gift for each participant. This might be a simple card, even a mini card, if you're not officially participating in the swap, a 3D treat, or a bag to keep all the swaps in. And that's something I like to do for my in-person swaps is everybody gets a bag to keep their swaps in, and it just has a cute little tag on it. And that's kind of my gift for participating in the swap. And again, it's not mandatory, but it's really nice. And I know when I participate in organized swaps, I really like that. So it's something you can consider doing. In-person swaps can be a bit logistically challenging, especially for large groups. And if you've never participated in an in-person swap, especially with a large group, you really have to think about the physical flow of how the swap will go. At bigger events, so when we're talking about in-person conferences or on stage, make sure that it's really clear where and when to meet. Think about bringing a sign to announce yourself. When we're talking about these big convention centers, go look at the floor plan ahead of time and pick somewhere that you're going to be able to meet everybody. If you've never been to that convention center before, maybe talk to somebody who's been there before. You know, what's a good place to meet for a swap? And then some ideas for organizing the flow. I kind of have 3 different ways that I've participated. One is you have each group line up, and the first person goes down the line, giving each person one of their cards, then goes to the end of the line. Then the next person goes and hands out their cards. You're not actually swapping cards as it goes on, like just that one person is dropping them in everybody's bag as they go along. This works best for small groups. You can do multiple groups. You can either do it simultaneously if you only have every person being in one group, or you'll have to do like group A, then anybody in group A who's in a different group has to go to their next group, then you can do group B, and so on and so forth. The other way you can do it is everybody puts their bag or box on a table, and then everybody kind of goes around and drops a card in each. This works really well for large groups. So I've done this with groups of like 50 before, but everybody needs a labeled container. So everybody has to bring or have, this is when I did the bags, because I had a bag for everybody that had their name on it. But so everybody needs to have something. So they either need to be provided that or know to bring that. If there's multiple groups, you can have multiple tables with multiple containers for each person. Or what I did was I had people put their oh no, this is this is this is the next one. This is kind of the third one. So set up multiple tables for different groups and have clear signage on each one as to which group it is. But people will have to have multiple containers if they're in more than one group. And the last one, the most chaotic, but it's kind of fun. Everyone stands in a circle, and then everybody puts their bags in the middle for that group. So you have to announce, okay, this is now the birthday group. This is the list of names. Those people put their bags in the middle, and then they do a round and put their cards in. Once everybody's done, you grab your bags and circle up again. This works really well. I did it because I had multiple smaller groups. So I had a bunch of people, but we had smaller groups on different themes. It can get really chaotic, and it does require people to pay attention. And if people aren't paying attention, it doesn't end up working out and they miss their group and things like that. It just gets a little bit nuts. So that's what I've got. Hopefully that helps. I love swapping, and I hope you do too. And I hope you participate in my next swaps. And happy stamping. Bye.